story opens with a boy, Ascari, and his father, Tapio, entering an old cabin. They admire photos of men in hunting gear holding trophies. Later, a convoy of trucks drives through mountain roads for a hunting trip. Tapio hands a map to Ascari, who looks for a red X, marking a secret hunting spot. As they set up camp, Ascari climbs a cliff to practice with a bow, struggling to pull the string back. Tapio argues with another man who doubts Ascari is ready. Tapio convinces him otherwise, and Ascari is allowed to continue. Ascari has one day and night to hunt alone. He practices aiming his bow at a deer statue, mimicking the motions of eating its heart. Meanwhile, the helicopter descends rapidly. Over the intercom, the pilot asks the three passengers what type of animals they're hunting. One of the passengers coolly replies, "Big game." Glancing at his tracking device, the passenger signals to the pilot to land. As soon as they touch down, the passenger steps out, carrying a briefcase. One of his men sets up a chair, and he sits down, scanning the forest calmly. Reaching into the briefcase, the passenger reveals a missile. He casually mentions that it's meant to bring down a civilian aircraft. The pilot, now uneasy, asks if the men are terrorists. The passenger smirks, confirms it, and then warns the pilot to start running, because they're going to kill him. As the pilot bolts into the forest, a man seizes the moment, aiming his missile to test it, and shoots the pilot. On Air Force One, alarms blare as a missile locks onto the plane. Agent Morris orders an emergency evacuation and forces the president into an escape pod, followed by guards parachuting out. However, their parachutes fail to open, and Morris shoots the last guard before jumping. In the forest, Ascari hears the crash. His eyes lock on the president's evacuation pod. He picks up a rock and hurls it at the pod, but it doesn't budge. Moving closer, Ascari taps on the pod door. There's a faint knock in return. A finger traces something on the pod's window. A code. Ascari quickly types in the code, and the pod hisses open. He darts back, watching as the president steps out, lighting a flare. "Show yourself," the president yells. Ascari remains hidden, but he uses an arrow to send a paper cup tied to a string toward the president's feet. The president picks it up, bringing it to his ear. Ascari's voice comes through the string, asking if the president is from another planet. The president responds,
"I'm from Earth. Is this some kid I'm talking to?"
Slowly, Ascari emerges from his hiding spot, bow still drawn. The president shows him his passport to confirm his identity. Ascari lowers his bow slightly, stating, "There's no village or town nearby." At the Pentagon, Fred Herbert, a former CIA agent, is briefed about the crash. He concludes it's a terrorist attack and identifies the type of missile used. They send helicopters to search for the president, but a tracker they follow leads them to Norway, which was separated from the plane. Back at the crash site, Morris and the terrorists, led by Hazar, find the empty escape pod. Ascari helps the president navigate through the forest, but he insists on completing his hunting mission or taking the president to safety. They camp for the night. Ascari asks the president what it's like to be powerful. The president said, "You just need to look tough." And the next morning, he continues hunting, making deer noises. Morris and Hazar hear the sounds and track Ascari to a ledge. There, Ascari finds a freeze box with a deer head inside, killed by his father. Meanwhile, the president discovers his dead guards, realizing their parachutes were tampered with. He takes a gun from a body and watches as Morris and Hazar approach. The president rushes to Ascari, who is dejected. The president gives Ascari his pin, reminding him of his bravery. But before they can leave, Morris shows up. Ascari attempts to shoot his bow at Morris, but misses. The president tries to use the gun but fails. A fight ensues, and Ascari is told to run. At the Pentagon, Fred tracks a terrorist helicopter. They suspect Hazar is involved, a wealthy oil sheik's illegitimate son. Meanwhile, Hazar traps the president in the freeze box and prepares to lift it with the helicopter. Ascari, watching from a distance, gathers his courage and jumps onto the box as it's lifted into the air. Morris notices Ascari and tries to shoot him down. Ascari manages to cut the box loose, sending it and the president into a river. They float down the river using the box as a raft, finding Air Force One's wreckage. Pentagon redirects Navy SEALs to the crash site. Hazar receives a message instructing him to kill the president. He sets a bomb inside the plane, but Morris betrays him, leaving Hazar stuck with the bomb. The president and Ascari escape as the bomb detonates. Morris pursues them, but Ascari shoots an arrow that dislodges a piece of shrapnel in Morris's chest, fatally wounding him. He falls from the helicopter just as it explodes. Back at the hunting camp, Tapio anxiously waits for his son. Navy SEALs arrive, and everyone assumes the president has died in the explosion. Suddenly, a parachute appears in the distance. It's Ascari and the president. They reunite with Tapio, and the president hails Ascari as the bravest man. At the Pentagon, Fred kills the vice president to cover up their plot to assassinate the president. Meanwhile, Ascari and the president pose for photos surrounded by helicopters, having survived their ordeal.